The morning was quiet at the little diner just outside Chicago. It wasn't busy yet, only a few customers scattered here and there, sipping their coffee or nibbling on toast. Lila Carter moved between tables, her sneakers squeaking softly against the tiled floor as she refilled cups and handed out menus. She had been working at this place for almost 2 years now, ever since her life took a turn she hadn't expected. Her belly was round now, proof of the baby growing inside her, but she didn't let it slow her down. Every day, she reminded herself that she was doing this for her child, for the tiny person who would soon depend on her completely. Lila liked mornings like these when the diner wasn't too crowded. It gave her time to think, even if most of her thoughts lately revolved around money. Rent was due next week, and the hospital bills were piling up faster than she could imagine. She hadn't heard from her partner in months, not since he left one rainy night without saying goodbye. Sometimes she wondered if things might have been different if she'd made other choices, but she quickly pushed those thoughts away. There was no use dwelling on the past. All she could do now was keep moving forward. As she wiped down the counter, her eyes drifted toward the corner booth near the window. Someone new had walked in while she wasn't looking. He sat by himself, his posture relaxed but somehow commanding attention. He wore a sleek black suit that looked expensive, unlike anything anyone else in the diner was wearing. His tie was perfectly knotted, and his shoes shone under the dim light filtering through the Venetian blinds. Something about him felt out of place in this humble setting, but also strangely magnetic. Curious, Lila grabbed her notepad and headed over to take his order. As she approached, he glanced up at her, and for a moment, she froze. His eyes were sharp and piercing, like they could see right through her. She cleared her throat and forced a smile. "Good morning," she said brightly. "What can I get you?" The man studied her for a second longer than necessary before speaking. "Coffee," he said simply, his voice smooth and measured. "Black." Lila nodded and scribbled it down on her notepad. "Anything else? We've got pancakes, eggs, bacon." He tilted his head slightly, considering. "Pancakes," he decided finally. "With maple syrup." "Got it," Lila replied, giving him another polite smile before turning to leave. But as she started walking away, she heard him call after her. "Wait." She turned back, surprised. "Yes?" He gestured for her to come closer. Hesitant but curious, Lila stepped nearer to the booth. Up close, she noticed how impeccably groomed he was, his dark hair neatly combed, his jawline strong and defined. There was something unsettling about him, though she couldn't quite put her finger on it. "You're expecting," he said, glancing briefly at her belly. It wasn't a question. Lila instinctively placed a hand over her stomach, feeling oddly defensive. "Yeah," she replied cautiously. "Is that a problem?" "No, not at all," he said quickly, raising his hands in a gesture of reassurance. "I just noticed." He paused, studying her again. "How far along are you?" 7 months, Lila answered, unsure why she was sharing this information with a stranger. Normally, she kept conversations with customers brief and impersonal. But there was something about the way he spoke, calm, deliberate, that made her want to respond. "Honestly," the man nodded slowly as if processing her answer. Then he leaned back in the booth, his expression unreadable. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The silence stretched long enough to make Lila uncomfortable. She shifted her weight from one foot to the other, clutching her notepad tightly. "Well, she began awkwardly. "I'll go get your coffee." But before she could turn away, he stopped her again. This time, his tone was softer, almost kind. "You're doing a good job," he said. "Raising a child, it's not easy, especially alone." Lila blinked, caught off guard by his words. How did he know she was alone? She hadn't mentioned it, and she certainly hadn't told him about her struggles. Was it written all over her face? Or maybe he was just guessing. Either way, his comment stung more than she cared to admit. "Thanks," she muttered, forcing another smile. "I'll be right back with your order." She hurried away, her heart pounding in her chest. Who was this guy, and why did he feel so strange? Back at the counter, she poured his coffee and prepared his pancakes, trying to shake off the uneasy feeling creeping up her spine. By the time she returned to his table, she had convinced herself that she was overthinking things. Maybe he was just a businessman passing through town, stopping for breakfast before heading to a meeting. Nothing unusual about that. When she set the plate and cup in front of him, he thanked her politely and began eating. Lila lingered for a moment, watching him curiously. He ate methodically, almost mechanically, as if every bite was calculated. His presence unnerved her, but she couldn't bring herself to walk away just yet. Finally, unable to resist, she asked, "Are you visiting from out of town?" He looked up at her, his lips curving into a faint smile. "You could say that," he replied cryptically. Lila waited for him to elaborate, but he didn't. Instead, he returned to his meal, leaving her standing there, confused and intrigued. Whoever this man was, he clearly wasn't going to reveal much about himself. Not yet, anyway. Reluctantly, Lila turned and walked back to the counter, stealing glances at him whenever she thought he wasn't looking. Little did she know, this encounter would change everything. After delivering Evan's coffee and pancakes, Lila tried to focus on her other tasks around the diner, but her mind kept drifting back to the mysterious man in the corner booth. There was something unsettling about him, something she couldn't quite place. She found herself glancing over at him every few minutes, watching as he ate slowly and deliberately, his eyes occasionally scanning the room like he was searching for something or someone. When she finally worked up the courage to check on him again, he was leaning back in the booth, sipping his coffee with an unreadable expression. As she approached, he looked up at her and gestured for her to come closer. Hesitant but curious, Lila obliged. "Do you watch the news?" he asked suddenly, surprising her with the random question. She blinked, caught off guard. "Not really," she admitted. "I don't have much time for TV these days." Evan nodded as if he'd expected that answer. "You might want to start paying attention," he said cryptically. "The world is changing faster than most people realize." Lila frowned, unsure what to make of his comment. "What do you mean?" Instead of answering directly, Evan reached into his suit jacket and pulled out a sleek black smartphone. He tapped the screen a few times before turning it toward her. On the display was a series of graphs, charts, and images, all related to advanced medical technology. Lila squinted, trying to make sense of what she was seeing, but the jargon-filled labels meant nothing to her. "This is Nexera Labs," Evan explained, his voice steady and confident. "We're working on some of the most groundbreaking research in human history. Gene editing, prenatal care, embryo enhancement. It's all part of our mission to improve lives." Lila stared at him blankly. "Gene editing? That sounds complicated." "It is," Evan agreed, "but also incredibly promising. Imagine being able to ensure your child is born healthy, free from genetic diseases or predispositions to illness. Imagine giving them the best possible start in life." His words struck a chord deep within her. Of course, she wanted her baby to be healthy and happy. That was all she thought about lately. But the idea of manipulating genes sounded like science, fiction, something out of a movie rather than real life. "I'm not sure I understand," she said cautiously. "Why are you telling me this?" Evan leaned forward, his piercing blue eyes locking onto hers. "Because you're exactly the kind of person we're looking for." Lila felt her stomach drop. "Looking for? For what?" "For Project Genesis," he replied without hesitation. "It's a top-secret initiative aimed at refining our prenatal care technologies. We need participants who are willing to help us test and improve these innovations." "Participants? Test subjects?" Lila took a step back, her instincts screaming at her to run. I don't think so," she stammered. "I'm just a waitress. I don't know anything about science or experiments." "You don't need to," Evan assured her quickly. "All you have to do is agree to let us monitor your pregnancy and provide regular updates on your health. In return, we'll offer you compensation beyond anything you could imagine." "Compensation?" Lila's thoughts raced. Money had been weighing heavily on her mind lately. Between rent, groceries, and hospital bills, she was barely keeping her head above water. If this man was offering financial support, it would solve so many of her problems. But at what cost? "How much are we talking about?" she asked hesitantly. Evan smiled, clearly sensing her interest. $500,000, he said matter-of-factly. Tax-free, up-front, no strings attached. Lila's breath hitched. $500,000. It was more money than she'd ever dreamed of having. With that kind of cash, she could pay off all her debts, move into a safer neighborhood, and give her baby everything they needed. But the number seemed almost too good to be true. "What's the catch?" she demanded, narrowing her eyes. "There has to be one." "There's no catch," Evan insisted. "Just an opportunity to secure your future and contribute to something revolutionary. Think about it, you'd be helping us change the course of humanity." Lila didn't respond right away. Her mind was spinning with posse. The next morning, Lila woke up feeling restless. She hadn't slept well, tossing and turning as Evan's words replayed in her mind over and over again. $500,000. A better life for your child. Help us change humanity. It all sounded too good to be true, but the offer was tempting enough to keep her awake most of the night. After getting dressed, she decided to visit Nexora Labs. She told herself it was just to learn more, to see if the place looked legitimate or like some shady operation out of a movie. But deep down, she knew curiosity wasn't the only thing driving her. The money Evan had offered kept creeping into her thoughts, whispering promises of stability and safety for her baby. When she arrived at the address Evan had given her, she was surprised by what she saw. Nexora Labs wasn't tucked away in some dingy office building. Instead, it occupied an entire skyscraper downtown. The lobby was sleek and modern, with polished marble floors, glowing LED lights, and a reception desk staffed by friendly employees. Everything about it screamed professionalism and success. Lila approached the front desk nervously. "I'm here to see Evan Holt," she said, clutching her purse tightly. The receptionist smiled warmly. "Of course, let me notify him that you're here." Moments later, Evan appeared, looking just as composed and confident as he had at the diner. He greeted her with a firm handshake and led her toward the elevators. As they rode up to the top floor, Lila couldn't help but notice how calm and certain he seemed. It made her feel even more unsure of herself. "This way," Evan said once they stepped off the elevator. He guided her through a series of hallways lined with windows overlooking the city. Inside each room, scientists worked diligently on various projects surrounded by cutting-edge technology. Lila felt completely out of place, like she'd stumbled into a world far beyond her understanding. Finally, they reached a large conference room where several people were waiting. They introduced themselves as members of the research team working on Project Genesis. One of them, a kind-looking woman named Dr. Allison Meyer, began explaining the project in detail. Project Genesis focuses on prenatal care advancements, Dr. Meyer explained, pulling up a holographic display in the center of the table. "We use genetic screening and enhancement techniques to identify potential health risks early in pregnancy. Our goal is to ensure healthier outcomes for both mothers and babies." Lila stared at the hologram, which showed animated images of DNA strands and developing embryos. It all looked incredible, but also overwhelming. "So, what exactly would I have to do?" she asked hesitantly. Dr. Meyer smiled reassuringly. "Your participation would involve routine checkups and data collection. We'd monitor your pregnancy closely, using non-invasive methods to gather information. You wouldn't feel any different from a regular pregnancy. It's mostly about observation and analysis." It sounded simple enough, but Lila still had doubts. "And there are no risks?" she pressed. "Nothing weird happening to my baby?" Evan stepped in, his tone soothing yet authoritative. "Every procedure has been rigorously tested and approved. Your safety, and your child's, is our top priority. This isn't about experimenting recklessly. It's about improving existing technologies so they can benefit everyone." Despite his reassurances, Lila couldn't shake the nagging feeling that something was missing. Why go through all this trouble to recruit her specifically? And why make such an extravagant offer when someone else could easily take her place? As the meeting continued, Lila noticed small details that unsettled her further. The scientists spoke enthusiastically about their work, but none of them mentioned possible downsides or complications. They acted as though everything was flawless, which struck her as unrealistic. Plus, the sheer amount of security cameras scattered throughout the facility made her wonder how transparent they really were. By the time the tour ended, Lila's head was spinning again. On one hand, the labs looked impressive, and the researchers seemed passionate about their work. On the other hand, the whole setup felt eerily controlled, like a carefully crafted facade designed to hide something darker beneath the surface. Before leaving, Evan walked her to the elevator. "Take your time to think it over," he said gently. "But remember, opportunities like this don't come around often. This could be your chance to give your child the best start in life." Lila nodded, forcing a smile. "Thanks for showing me around. I'll let you know soon." Once outside, she took a deep breath, feeling the weight of her decision pressing down on her shoulders. The building loomed behind her, its glass walls reflecting the cloudy sky. She glanced back at it one last time before heading home, her mind racing with questions she didn't have answers to. That evening, as she sat alone in her apartment, Lila tried to weigh the pros and cons objectively. The money was undeniably appealing. It would solve so many of her problems. But the risks, however vague, gnawed at her conscience. Could she really trust these people? Or was she being lured into something dangerous under the guise of progress? For now, all she knew was that she needed more information before making a choice. Whatever happened next, she vowed to protect her baby above everything else, even if it meant walking away from $500,000. That evening, Lila couldn't stop thinking about what she had seen at Nexora Labs. The tour had been impressive, no doubt about it. The sleek facilities, the cutting-edge technology, and the passionate researchers all seemed like they belonged in a dream world where science solved every problem. But as much as she tried to focus on the positives, little details kept nagging at her. It started during the tour when she accidentally overheard two scientists talking quietly near a lab door. She hadn't meant to eavesdrop. It just happened, because the hallways were so quiet. One of them was saying something about unforeseen side effects, and the other responded nervously, "We can't let anyone find out about those failed trials." Lila froze mid-step, pretending to examine a nearby display of molecular models. Her heart raced as she strained to catch more of their conversation without being noticed. They mentioned terms like accelerated aging and genetic instability, but their voices dropped too low for her to hear everything clearly. Before she could make sense of it, one of the scientists glanced in her direction and both quickly walked away. The encounter left her shaken. What were they hiding, and why did it sound so dangerous? She wanted to ask Evan or Dr. Meyer about it, but fear held her back. If they found out she'd overheard something she wasn't supposed to, would they try to silence her? Or worse, pressure her into agreeing to participate? When the tour ended and Lila returned home, she called her best friend Rachel Monroe, hoping to clear her head. Rachel had always been the practical one, the person who could cut through confusion and help Lila see things clearly. "Okay, spill it," Rachel said after answering the phone. "You sound like you've got a lot on your mind." So Lila told her everything, from Evan's unexpected appearance at the diner to the tour of Nexora Labs and the strange conversation she'd overheard. Rachel listened silently until Lila finished, then sighed heavily. "Lila, this sounds sketchy," Rachel said bluntly. "I mean, $500,000? That's not normal. No one throws that kind of money around unless they're desperate or trying to cover something up. But they showed me all the cool stuff they're doing," Lila protested weakly. "It's supposed to help babies be healthier. Isn't that a good thing?" "Sure, if it works," Rachel countered. "But what about those failed trials you heard them talking about? Does that sound safe to you? I don't care how fancy their labs look, if there are risks involved, you need to know exactly what they are before making any decisions." Rachel's words hit hard. Lila knew her friend was right, but the idea of walking away from such a life-changing opportunity felt impossible. How could she turn down the chance to give her baby a better future? Still, the thought of putting her child in danger terrified her even more. "I'll look into it," Lila promised. "Maybe I can find some information online." Over the next hour, she and Rachel scoured the internet for anything related to Nexora Labs. At first, they found glowing articles praising the company's innovations and breakthroughs. But as they dug deeper, cracks began to show. There were old news reports about lawsuits filed by former participants in early experiments. Some claimed they hadn't been fully informed about the risks, while others described mysterious health issues that arose afterward. One article stood out. A whistleblower had accused the company of prioritizing profit over ethics, claiming that certain projects were rushed despite incomplete testing. Though the claims were never proven in court, the story raised enough red flags to make Lila's stomach churn. "This doesn't feel right," she murmured, staring at the screen. "What if something goes wrong with my baby? I wouldn't forgive myself." "You're already doing the hardest part," Rachel reminded her. "Thinking critically about this instead of jumping in blindly. Trust your instincts, Lila. If it feels off, it probably is." By midnight, Lila had made up her mind, at least partially. She wouldn't accept Evan's offer, not yet. Not until she understood exactly what she'd be getting herself and her baby into. But she also knew she couldn't just ignore him. He was clearly determined to recruit her, and turning him down outright might lead to trouble. The next morning, Lila decided to confront Evan directly. She called. After leaving Nexora Labs, Lila knew she couldn't ignore the uneasy feeling in her chest. Evan's answers had been smooth and rehearsed, but they didn't erase the doubts gnawing at her mind. She needed proof, something concrete to confirm, whether her instincts were right or if she was overreacting. That night, she sat down at her small kitchen table with her laptop, ready to dig deeper into the company's past. Rachel joined her via video call, determined to help. "Let's start with those lawsuits," Rachel suggested. "If there are court documents or testimonies online, we might find some real answers." For hours, they scoured the internet together, piecing together fragments of information. They discovered archived news articles detailing allegations against Nexora Labs. Former participants claimed they hadn't been fully informed about potential risks before agreeing to experimental procedures. Some reported strange side effects after giving birth, babies born prematurely, developmental delays, even unexplained illnesses that doctors couldn't diagnose. One story stood out. A mother named Lisa Harper described how her son developed severe allergies within months of being born. According to her lawsuit, Nexora Labs refused to acknowledge any connection between their treatments and his condition. Though the case was eventually dismissed due to lack of evidence, Lisa's emotional testimony painted a chilling picture of what could go wrong. "This is bad," Lila whispered, leaning back in her chair. Her hands trembled as she scrolled through more details. "What if this happens to my baby?" "It won't," Rachel said firmly, though her voice betrayed her own concern. "Because you're not going to let it. We need to keep digging until we have enough to expose them." As the hours passed, Lila noticed something disturbing. A pattern. Many of the complaints involved rushed trials, incomplete data, and aggressive recruitment tactics. It seemed like Nexora Labs prioritized speed over safety, pushing boundaries without considering the consequences. The more she read, the angrier she became, not just for herself, but for all the families who had trusted the company only to suffer later. By morning, exhaustion weighed heavily on Lila, but she felt a newfound clarity. She couldn't accept Evan's offer, not when so many warning signs pointed to danger. Still, she knew walking away wouldn't be easy. Evan wasn't the type of person to take rejection lightly, and she worried he might try to pressure her further. The next day, Lila decided to contact someone who could investigate Nexora Labs more thoroughly. She remembered hearing about Matt Harper, a local journalist known for exposing corporate scandals. After tracking down his email address, she sent him a message explaining everything she'd learned so far. To her relief, Matt responded within hours, asking to meet in person. They arranged to meet at a quiet cafe downtown. When Lila arrived, Matt introduced himself as a tall man with messy brown hair and a notebook always in hand. His sharp eyes immediately put her at ease. He seemed genuinely interested in helping. "I've heard whispers about Nexora Labs before," Matt admitted after listening to her story. "But no one's ever come forward with solid evidence. If what you're saying checks out, this could be huge." Lila nodded, feeling a mix of hope and fear. "I don't want anyone else to get hurt because of them. Please help me stop them." Matt promised to look into it, starting with public records and insider sources. In the meantime, he advised Lila to stay cautious. "If they suspect you're onto something, they might try to intimidate you. Don't engage unless absolutely necessary." Lila took his advice to heart. Over the next few days, she avoided answering calls from unknown numbers and kept her phone nearby at all times, just in case. Despite her efforts, Evan managed to reach her anyway. It happened one evening when she returned home from work. Her phone buzzed on the counter, and when she picked it up, she saw Evan's name flashing on the screen. Hesitant, she answered. "Lila," Evan began, his tone calm but firm. "I haven't heard back from you. Have you made a decision?" She swallowed hard, gripping the edge of the counter for support. "Yes, I have. I'm sorry, but I can't participate in your project." There was a long pause on the other end. When Evan finally spoke, his voice carried an edge she hadn't heard before. "Are you sure about that? This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for you and your child." "I'm sure," Lila replied, forcing herself to sound confident. "I did some research and I don't think it's safe." Evan sighed, almost theatrically. "I understand your concerns, but I assure you, our methods are sound. Whatever you've read or heard, it's likely exaggerated or taken out of context. It's not just rumors." Lila shot back, surprising herself with her boldness. "People have gotten hurt. Babies have gotten sick. I can't risk my child's life for money." Another pause followed, heavier this time. When Evan spoke again, his tone had shifted, colder, more calculating. "You're making a mistake, Lila. Think about what you're giving up. A better future for your family, security, stability. Are you really willing to throw that away?" His words hit a nerve, but Lila refused to back down. "Yes," she said firmly. "I am." Evan didn't respond right away. For a moment she thought he might hang up, but then he added, "Very well. But remember, you'll regret this decision sooner than you think." The call ended abruptly, leaving Lila shaken. She stared at her phone, wondering if she'd made the right choice. Evan's warning echoed in her mind, sending chills down her spine. Was he bluffing, or did he mean it? That night, Lila barely slept. Every creak of the floorboards outside her apartment made her jump, imagining shadowy figures lurking in the hallway. She texted Rachel, asking her to check in regularly, just in case something happened. Then she double-checked her locks and turned off her phone, unsure whom she could trust anymore. Despite her fears, one thing was clear. She couldn't turn back now. Evan's threats only reinforced her resolve to protect her baby, and to expose the truth about Nexora Labs. With Matt's help, she hoped to gather enough evidence to shut them down for good. Until then, she vowed to stay vigilant, knowing the fight ahead wouldn't be easy. Little did she know, Evan wasn't ready to give up either. The next few days passed in a blur of fear and determination for Lila. Every time she stepped outside, she felt like someone was watching her. She checked over her shoulder constantly, jumping at every sound. Her nerves were frayed, and sleep eluded her completely. Evan's warning replayed in her mind like a broken record. "You'll regret this decision sooner than you think." Despite her growing paranoia, Lila refused to back down. She continued working with Matt Harper, sharing everything she'd uncovered about Nexora Labs. Together, they pieced together a clearer picture of the company's unethical practices. Rushed trials, hidden risks, and aggressive recruitment tactics aimed at vulnerable individuals like herself. The more evidence they gathered, the stronger their case became. But Lila couldn't shake the feeling that Evan wasn't done with her yet. He had sounded too calm during their phone call, almost eerily so. It was as if he knew something she didn't, a secret weapon or plan to change her mind. That thought haunted her every waking moment. One evening, after finishing her shift at the diner, Lila walked to her car in the nearly empty parking garage. The air was cold, and the fluorescent lights buzzed faintly above her head. Shadows danced along the concrete walls, making her feel even more uneasy. She quickened her pace, eager to get home where she could lock the door behind her and feel safe, even if only temporarily. As she approached her car, she noticed a figure leaning casually against it. Her heart skipped a beat when she recognized him immediately. It was Evan Holt. He stood there with his hands in his pockets, looking as composed as ever, though there was a sharpness to his gaze that hadn't been there before. "Lila," he said smoothly, straightening up as she stopped a few feet away. "We need to talk." She instinctively took a step back, clutching her car keys tightly in one hand. "What are you doing here?" she demanded, her voice trembling despite her efforts to stay calm. "I wanted to see you in person," Evan replied, taking a slow step toward her. "To give you one last chance to reconsider." "There's nothing to reconsider," Lila shot back, her voice firmer now. "I already told you. I'm not participating in your project." Evan sighed, shaking his head slightly, as if disappointed. "You're making a grave mistake. Do you really think turning me down will stop what's coming? You've involved yourself in matters far bigger than you realize." "What does that mean?" Lila asked, narrowing her eyes. "Are you threatening me?" "Not at all," Evan said quickly, raising his hands in a gesture of innocence. "I'm simply pointing out the reality of your situation. People like us, we don't take rejection lightly. If you continue down this path, you may find yourself facing consequences you never anticipated." His words sent a chill down her spine. "Is that supposed to scare me?" she challenged, trying to mask her fear. "Because it won't work. I know what you're doing, Evan. I know about the lawsuits, the failed trials, the lies, and I won't let you use me or my baby for your experiments." For a brief moment, Evan's polished facade cracked. His jaw tightened and his piercing blue eyes hardened. "You have no idea who you're dealing with," he said quietly, his tone low and dangerous. "This isn't just about money or science anymore. This is about control, about shaping the future, and anyone who gets in our way, well, let's just say they tend to disappear." Lila's breath caught in. The morning after Lila finalized the report with Matt, the world began to change, for better or worse. Matt had spent hours sending the evidence to multiple journalists and whistleblowing platforms, ensuring it would reach the public no matter what. By midday, the first article broke online. The headline was bold and impossible to ignore. "Nexora Labs exposed. Unethical practices in prenatal genetic testing." Within hours, the story went viral. News outlets picked up the report, sharing shocking details about the company's failed trials, lawsuits from former participants, and allegations of manipulating vulnerable individuals into dangerous experiments. Social media erupted with outrage as people shared their own suspicions and experiences related to Nexora Labs. Protesters gathered outside the company's headquarters, holding signs that demanded justice and accountability. Lila watched it all unfold from her apartment, glued to her laptop screen. Each new update brought a mix of relief and anxiety. On one hand, she felt vindicated. Her decision to stand up to Evan had sparked a movement that could save countless lives. On the other hand, she couldn't shake the fear that this wasn't over. Evan Holt didn't strike her as the type of person to accept defeat quietly. Her fears were confirmed later that evening when her phone rang. It was an unknown number, but something compelled her to answer. "Hello?" she said cautiously. "Ms. Carter," came a voice on the other end. Not Evan's, but someone equally unsettling. The tone was cold and clipped, devoid of warmth or humanity. "You've made a grave mistake." Lila's stomach sank. She gripped the phone tightly, her knuckles turning white. "Who is this?" "That doesn't matter," the voice replied. "What matters is that you've caused significant damage to our operations. Damage that will not go unpunished." I didn't do anything wrong, Lila shot back, her voice trembling despite her attempt to sound brave. I exposed the truth. That's not a crime. There was a long pause during which Lila could hear faint breathing on the other end. Then the voice spoke again. Quieter but more menacing. Consider this your final warning. Stop pushing this story, or there will be consequences. For you, and for your child. Before Lila could respond, the line went dead. She stared at the phone, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might burst out of her chest. Whoever these people were, they weren't bluffing. They knew exactly how to get under her skin. Panic set in, but Lila forced herself to stay calm. She called Matt immediately, explaining what had happened. He listened intently, his expression grim even through the video call. They're trying to intimidate you, he said firmly. But we can't let them win. If we stop now, they'll just keep doing what they're doing to others. I know, Lila whispered, tears welling up in her eyes. But I'm scared. What if they come after me? Or my baby? We'll protect you, Matt assured her. I'll reach out to some contacts who specialize in cases like this. We'll make sure you have legal support and security if needed. You're not alone in this, Lila. His words helped steady her nerves, but the weight of the situation remained heavy on her shoulders. Over the next few days, Lila took extra precautions. She avoided leaving her apartment unless absolutely necessary, and when she did, she stayed vigilant, constantly checking her surroundings. Rachel visited often, bringing groceries and keeping her company. Together, they brainstormed ways to ensure Lila's safety while the fallout from the expose continued to unfold. Meanwhile, the pressure on Nexora Labs mounted. Government agencies launched investigations into the company's practices, raiding their facilities and seizing documents. Former employees came forward, corroborating Lila's claims and adding fuel to the fire. Public opinion turned sharply against the company, and its stock prices plummeted overnight. Evan Holt disappeared from the spotlight entirely. No press releases, no interviews, no appearances. It was as if he had vanished into thin air. But Lila knew better than to believe he was gone for good. Men like him always found ways to survive and to retaliate. One afternoon, as Lila scrolled through updates on her laptop, she received a message from Matt. "Check this out," he wrote, attaching a link to a breaking news article. She clicked on it, her breath catching in her throat as she read the headline, CEO of Nexora Labs arrested amid scandal. According to the report, Evan Holt had been taken into custody following a federal investigation. Authorities accused him of fraud, conspiracy, and unethical medical practices. Dozens of charges were filed against him personally, along with several high-ranking executives at Nexora Labs. The article included photos of Evan being led away in handcuffs, his usual composure replaced by a look of barely contained fury. For the first time since this nightmare began, Lila allowed herself a small smile. Justice was finally catching up to him. But even as she celebrated the victory, she reminded herself that the fight wasn't truly over yet. Legal battles would drag on for months, maybe years. And while Evan was behind bars, she couldn't forget the network of power and influence he represented, a system that might still try to silence her. That night, Lila sat by her window, watching the city lights flicker in the distance. Her hands rested protectively over her belly, feeling the gentle kicks of her unborn child. Despite everything she'd been through, the threats, the fear, the sleepless nights, she felt a sense of peace wash over her. She had done the right thing, not just for herself, but for her baby, and for every other mother who deserved to bring a child into the world without fear. As she closed her eyes, exhaustion finally overtaking her, Lila whispered softly to her baby, "We're safe, now, and we're going to be okay." Little did she know the world was about to learn just how strong she truly was. Months passed after the expose on Nexora Labs, and life slowly began to settle into a rhythm for Lila. The scandal dominated headlines for weeks, sparking debates about ethics in science and corporate accountability. Evan Holt remained in custody, awaiting trial alongside several other executives. Legal teams worked tirelessly to unravel the tangled web of corruption that had fueled the company's dangerous experiments. Though the process was slow and complicated, justice seemed inevitable. For Lila, the hardest part wasn't waiting for the courts to decide Evan's fate. It was learning to live without fear. Even after his arrest, she couldn't shake the feeling that someone might still come after her. Every knock on her door sent her heart racing. Every unknown caller made her hesitate before answering. But over time, those fears began to fade, replaced by a growing sense of strength. She realized she had faced one of the most powerful men in the biotech industry, and won. And then came the day she had been dreaming of for months, the birth of her baby. It was a cold January morning when her water broke, sending her rushing to the hospital with Rachel by her side. The labor was long and exhausting, but when she finally held her son in her arms, all the pain melted away. He was perfect. Tiny fingers curled around hers, soft breaths warming her skin. Tears streamed down her face as she whispered his name for the first time. Ethan. In that moment, Lila felt an overwhelming surge of gratitude, not just for her healthy baby, but for the journey that had brought them here. She thought back to the diner where it all began, to the mysterious man who had offered her $500,000, and to the choice she'd made to protect her child. That decision had changed everything, not only for her family but for countless others who would now be spared from Nexora Labs' unethical practices. Life didn't magically become easy after Ethan's birth. Money was still tight, and raising a child alone came with its own set of challenges. But Lila found joy in the little things, the way Ethan cooed when she sang to him, the warmth of his tiny body against her chest, the quiet moments spent watching him sleep. For the first time in years, she felt truly hopeful about the future. Rachel visited often, bringing groceries or helping with household chores. "You're stronger than anyone I know," she told Lila one afternoon while rocking Ethan in his bassinet. Not many people would have stood up to someone like Evan Holt. "I didn't have a choice," Lila replied softly, stroking Ethan's cheek. "I had to protect him, and honestly, I think this whole experience taught me something important. I'm capable of more than I ever realized." As the weeks turned into months, Lila started volunteering at community centers, sharing her story with groups of expectant mothers. She warned them about predatory companies and encouraged them to ask questions, trust their instincts, and advocate for themselves. Her talks resonated deeply with the women she met, many of whom thanked her for giving them the courage to speak. Matt stayed in touch too, keeping her updated on the ongoing legal battles against Nexora Labs. One day he called with exciting news. The court had ruled in favor of shutting down the company permanently. All remaining assets would be seized, and stricter regulations were being implemented to prevent similar abuses in the future. "That's amazing," Lila said, holding Ethan close as she listened. "Thank you for everything, Matt. I couldn't have done this without you." "You did most of the work," Matt replied warmly. "You're the reason this happened. Never forget that." By spring, Lila decided it was time to move forward in a bigger way. With Rachel's encouragement, she enrolled in online classes to earn her GED, hoping to eventually pursue a career in nursing. Helping others during pregnancy and childbirth had become her passion, and,